Hey everybody, good afternoon. This is Param Aftekari, Executive Vice President here at Cyber Risk Alliance Communities. And as always, it's fantastic to be here with you for another edition of CISO Stories. For those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome. We're happy to have you. For those of you who are regulars, good to have you back. As always, a reminder what CISO Stories is. It is a product of the CRA CISO community. Cyber Risk Collaborative is a membership program for current and future cyber leaders. And so one of the things we do is conduct research with our members, get from them insights as to what are top of mind, what are the biggest challenges, and then we run multi-week working groups and other collaborative exercises where they're really digging deep and sharing best practices, lessons learned, as well as actual content and resources, which we then take and aggregate and redistribute to the community for knowledge and educational purposes. One of the things that happens during these programs is that our members talk about the partners that are very helpful to them in accomplishing various goals and solving problems. And so what CISO Stories is basically our way of taking what happens in the membership and creating a month's worth of content on it, where we educate you, the kind of general public, on certain issues, and we bring in the members and the technology partners who helped us successfully deliver on those working group objectives. And so today and this month, we've been talking about data. Today, we're here to talk about how to improve your organization's data security posture. I'm joined by Steve Hindle, who is the founder of Achilles Shield and the Chief Security and Compliance Advisor at Spirion, which I just heard has a really cool origin story in terms of a name. So Steve, it's great to have you here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Param. It's good to work together again. Yeah, and it's great to see everybody. Spirion is one of the most fun parts of my life and my day right now. And being originally from Scotland, ending up here in the United States, and I'm all about the data and data evangelism and really getting to grips with the data. And so I had a chat with Kevin Coppins, the CEO of Spirion, just as a casual kind of, hey, we're both passionate about the same things, and Spirion was founded with the mantra of protecting what matters and to eliminate the risks of data breaches by eliminating the risks of sensitive data. And Spirion, SPI, sensitive protected information, and Rion is like the Celtic word for king or leader. So it's like the leader of protecting sensitive, protected information. So I love that. I think it's great. It ties in really nicely. And I'm a dog guy, and the logo is a robot dog. I mean, come on, how could I not?
It all just works. I mean, sometimes it just gets to be. So that's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Steve, excited for the conversation. Great to have you. And to the audience at home, we have a Q&A function and a chat function. So please interact with us if you have questions. We'll do our best to get to them. One of our speakers, unfortunately, had a personal matter come up, unable to join us. Wish him the best, but we'll. Steve and I are both quite chatty, so we'll keep you guys entertained and educate you on a few things along the way. Steve, we're here to talk about data security posture management. I think just to start with, of all the threats and all the risks that are out there, data, it keeps to come up as one of those kind of important areas. Why is data security important? It seems like a simple question, but I think it's important to start there and level set, especially because of the hyper evolving technology landscape that we have and how data implications change really every 6 to 9 months, it seems like.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, why is data important? It's because it's all of us, right? I mean, if we really get down to it, every organization is built upon and derives value out of data, right? And sorry, my Britishness is going to come through with the way I say certain words. So data, potato, nobody says that. Right. So why is data important? It's because data is everybody. It's about people. It's about us. It's about our loved ones, our families, our kids. Everybody's data is out there in somebody else's system, and that's why data security has to be important. And understanding your data as an organization, what data you have, customers or your own intellectual property, sensitive data, is critical, right? It cannot be understated how important it is. But as practitioners, I've been a CISO and a CIO for decades, and in different organizations servicing customers around the world. And at the heart of everything is the data. Right, between your people and your data, between your technology and your data, you've always got people. So I focus that it's a very human, very centric approach to it. Protecting what matters means protecting people. Protecting people means protecting data.
Yeah, that's so important. I think we're talking about data security, but as the audience will see, that our ability to do so is a combination of technology, controls, and whatnot. But really, it's changing hearts and minds, and really making sure we engage stakeholders to understand why this is so important, and to change behaviors or to support decisions and investments that we need to solve the problems that we're going to talk about. So to that point, I kind of want to jump right in, because data security posture management is a term that has recently been introduced, and so I think it's yet another help our audience understand what is it and what does it mean in kind of layman's terms.
Oh, that's great. What does it mean in layman's terms? If you go out there and you start trying to find platforms, vendors, documentation, strategy on DSPM, it's the new SPM, right? We had CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management. We had Application Security Posture Management, ASPM. We had Identity Security Posture Management, right? Now we've got Data Security Posture Management, but it's not well defined. Gartner's hype cycle started talking about this a long time ago, right? It first started getting coined in 2012 and then really became a hype cycle in 2022. But here we are, 2024. You go looking on, say, Gartner's website, and you won't find it. You won't find DSPM defined anywhere. Data security posture management can be divided up into, is it about data security? Is it about data privacy? And if so, you can divide that up amongst all of the vendors and technologies that are out there. Data security is identity, it's access management, it's encryption, it's PKI, it's DLP, it's data loss prevention, right? And then on the privacy side, it's data governance, it's privacy operations, it's incident management, it's the compliance functionality around it. The insurers and everything get a weigh in on there. But data security is often owned by security, IT, right? CISOs, CIOs. Data privacy is often on a different side of the shop. It's legal, it's privacy and compliance. So you told me to put it in layman's terms, but if you go out looking, you're not going to find it defined in layman's terms. Foundationally, DSPM has to start with understanding and mapping out your data as an organization. If you don't know where your data is and how it flows through the company and how it empowers your revenue and your business growth, you're not going to be able to secure it. You can't develop a security posture for the organization without understanding the organization. And it's the same for data, right? We have to go out there and we have to understand, where is it that our data exists in the company? How does it drive business and drive revenue? And importantly, how do we secure it appropriately? By understanding it.
I think that's you unpacked it well, and I think when you talk, one of the keys that you referenced is not knowing what your data is and where it is, in the context of the fact that you have so many different stakeholders who, depending on the culture, may or may not be working well together, and certainly have different functions, even if you have a good kind of healthy culture. But when you have the CIO creating, having responsibility for data, you have business leaders who are buying shadow IT and also creating data sets over here, and third-party vendors and all sorts of things. How do you even start? How do you go about getting a handle on where all your data is, so you can monitor it for the behaviors and anomalous behaviors and that you're looking for, and ultimately secure it? But how do you start by figuring out where it is?
Yeah, well, I like that. So I'll tell you a story, and I'll work around and back to it. So to give everybody an idea of who this Steve Hindle guy is and why he's here talking with you about data security and data security posture management. I worked for a truly global BPO business process outsourcer, servicing about 700 of the world's most well-known brands across all industries and verticals. So we had banking, fintech, insurance, healthcare, entertainment, hospitality, retail, you name it. If the brand is well known and exists, from the phones that you hold in your hand, the carriers that it runs on, the telecommunications networks, the banking and the apps that you use, they were my clients and customers. And I stayed in that industry for over 20 years because every day was different. And I was building and securing data and architecture for over 700 companies. And we had to build to fit. And I've carried that mantra into my own business. So why was data important? Because we had 160,000 people at the point where I left the organization following an acquisition of just shy of $5 billion in revenue, $4.5 billion in revenue, with 8 million interactions with customers and customers' data per day of all sensitive data types. So you can see that for an organization like that, it's really built on data. And its focus and its revenue is all generated from the customer interaction. The customer interaction is inevitably around data, whether it be generic or sensitive. And now even just tying somebody's name to an email address, to a phone number, that's now PII, that's personally identifiable information. It has to be protected because people have realized that it's an attack vector to get into their banking accounts, get into their social media accounts. If I've got your name and your email address, I can find so much out about you online. And I can attack you, and I can attack the organizations that you work for.
Yep.
So I chaired the data governance committee for that public company, bringing in internal audit, external audit. We had PwC, Deloitte. We worked with a lot of different audit companies doing audits of our compliance, whether it be payment card industry compliance, PCI, all the way through GDPR, privacy, working with our chief privacy officer. We could not have been successful. And I still to this day could not have been successful if it wasn't for building data governance programs, which I continue to do, advising clients and customers and building data and AI governance for organizations. Now, it has to be a collaborative approach. The reason it says, it's a data governance committee with a data governance program, and we have AI steering committees now, figuring out how to leverage AI to drive business value. The reason that the word committee is often associated with governance is because it needs to be cross-functional. You have to bring in every facet of the business and every stakeholder to understand that they have a role to play in the security and governance of data across the organization. So whilst I was the head of security and I represent security, at the end of the day, I worked in partnership with IT, with the CIO. I worked in partnership with the chief legal officer and general counsel. And I worked to bring in, we didn't want the committee to be too bloated. You can imagine 160,000 people. It's a big organization, even on the executive chain. But we would also rotate in operations leaders. Every time we met, every quarter, we'd bring in a new operations leader to talk about their areas of the business and to listen to what we were doing as an organization. So everybody left every single meeting with a feeling like they've had input into it, feeling like they've contributed, feeling like they've brought something to the table, and learning how we're servicing them in return and dialing it back to help them and their business grow securely and safely. So to net it out, data governance has to be cross-functional, it has to be collaborative. And while somebody may own the coordination and bringing all of these parties together, it should be made very clear that no one group technically owns data governance. Data governance is a true team effort. It's a team play. We talk about the fundamental blocking and tackling as though it's a sport. Well, okay, it's a team sport. Bring people together to understand the roles they play in protecting the data. That's the whole nature of data governance, and why data governance, data privacy, and AI governance is all done by committee. Because we've got to do that. You need to steer it though, because otherwise it's death by committee and nobody makes any decisions. It has to be driven by the business. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have taken a very, very particular approach, and why I believe it's the approach, talking with CISOs and leaders around the world, it's the approach that works.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And we talk about stakeholder engagement and the need for cross-functional, cross-team partnerships often in the context of various security discussions, and I think this is one where it's very clear why the operating environment of an organization and how decisions are made really requires the type of model that you described. When you have that committee formed and you've set up your cadence and you're meeting once a quarter or once a month and bringing people in, can you explain to when we were prepping, we were talking about the kind of having this be actionable for folks. So one of the things that I think would be helpful is what are some of the specific decisions that were made? So somebody comes in to the committee, you learn about a new business function or learn a little bit more details around a certain part of the business. But what do you do with that knowledge and that situational awareness? How do you prioritize? And particularly, I'm thinking about when you start to get visibility into the data, and sure, you can collect it and whatnot. But then, so where do you start? A company of 160,000 people, there is varying degrees of sensitivity. So how do you go about within the framework you described, creating some classes of data to then presumably start, if you have to prioritize, start with your most sensitive crown jewels and then go down. But talk about how you go through that process and what technical and non-technical controls and solutions are out there to help with that.
Right. No, absolutely. And this is where it gets kind of squirrely, right? Because data by its very nature is incredibly squirrely. People play loose and fast with it in order to get business value out, and you don't ever want to stand in the way of innovation. If we look at the promise of leveraging AI and Gen AI tooling these days to drive and deliver business value and improve both your market share and your cap table. A statistic that terrifies me, which I always lean on, is that there was a Marsh & McLennan poll done about a year ago and refreshed about a year ago, where they asked business leaders what was their biggest concern. Ransomware. Well, ransomware is inherently targeting data when you think about it. It's targeting the brand and the nature of the company by going after the data. But only 54% of the leaders polled all around the world said they knew where their data was. So when you talk about getting started, you'd be surprised, or maybe not, that most organizations either they have a very loosely formed data governance program, and maybe they don't necessarily have much beyond bringing stakeholders together and talking about the security and controls around the business and what they do and how they approach it. But again, if most people don't know where their data is, that's the biggest problem. I work and deliver, incident response training, testing, and resiliency for organizations, doing tabletops, things like that. I always lead in with discovery calls. I try and make it relevant to their business when we're trying to stretch our muscles to be more resilient in the event that we have to flex them when it comes down to an incident. And in doing so, I always ask organizations, okay, tell me, do you handle sensitive data? No, we don't. That's not the business we're in. Okay, great. So we meet with each business unit. We sit down, and one of the businesses or the departments that I always insist on meeting with is HR. So because even if somebody says we're not a data organization, well, you're a people organization, probably, mostly. So therefore, let's talk about how you onboard people. How do you find people? How do you onboard them? And then eventually, things happen. How do you offboard them? As people win the lottery and they leave, let's focus on the positive. I'm a sunshine yellow kind of guy. But if as soon as we get into those conversations, often in the room with security leaders, privacy leaders, legal counsel, we get in those conversations with HR, and we find data is everywhere across that department, that organization. W-2s, PDFs, Excel files with people's name, address, phone number, email, date of birth, social security number, driving license, passport. Maybe if they're immigrants, I-9s, all this kind of stuff, right? And to be an organization and say we don't have to worry about compliance, we don't have to worry about getting audited because we don't handle sensitive data. You got people. Yeah. Pretty darn sure you've got sensitive data then. And so when it comes to forming data governance structure, or taking a data-led approach to an organization, you know immediately. If you have a HR department, you know where there's a massive raft of sensitive data likely sat relatively unprotected in processes that you talked about, shadow IT, that you can't really control, because they're not technologists. HR people are, generally speaking, not technologists. And so as such, they don't necessarily see the way that data can start to proliferate across an organization without a lot of controls around it. So what I say to everybody around data governance is get started, because you're languishing in the moment if you build policies. We must do this, we must do that, but you don't get started on actively going out and identifying and understanding the processes in your business that create these data vaults or these toxic data silos out there in your organization. But you likely have a full understanding that you have a HR organization that handles lots of sensitive data of people. You probably gave over your W-2s with your social security number in it, either on a form or something that they've had to process. And similarly, if you have customers and customers pay you, or maybe you pay out, then you may well have banking information, maybe payment card information. If you have company expenses, you likely have company credit cards. You'd be surprised how often we had to intercept EAs and people just sending people's credit card numbers out or back in by email. So because they thought that was just, hey, can you give me the CEO's credit card number to pay for this flight booking that we've got going on? Yeah, sure, it's this. Or, can you give me a scan of their driver's license to get them in, or their passport to get them into this country through customs? Yeah, here you go. I'll scan it in just now. I'll send it to you by email. So why are we not looking at email as a sensitive data store? Why? Because you don't store sensitive data in email. So we don't need to worry about that. And yet, for organizations that we go out and if we're delivering incident response, if there's been a data incident, I don't want to use the B word. Lawyers tend to get all edgy if I say the B word, but it rhymes with reach. So if you have a data incident, first thing that has to happen is you got to understand how bad it is. Well, if you don't have a handle on how much data is out there and where that data lives, you're going to pay an awful lot of money to then use a tool or a technology to assess the extent of that data incident. So why aren't we doing that up front, Param? That's the question. That is step one. That is the groundwork, the foundations you have to lay down for any data governance and data security program, is to know where your data is. And if you're thinking, well, my God, I'm a huge organization, I have to boil the ocean to make that happen, I've got to go out and scan it. No, you don't. You know inherently that HR processes a lot of sensitive data. Start there. You all operate by email. Why don't you take a look through your mail stores? Start there, right? Start what you know, because you will be shocked by what you don't know about what you think you know. And I think that's where technologies and tools that can go out, you can leverage. Microsoft has them. Microsoft has Microsoft Purview, for example. Spirium, we mentioned at the start, is a data discovery, classification, and security posture management tool. Go out, leverage a tool. There are lots of them out there. Most of them are very good. And go out and find your data, and then start to, just like you said, it's now your crown jewels, right? Sensitive data is your crown jewels, because if it gets out, it's not a low cost problem. It's $1 million problem. So secure it now, because I guarantee if you're not looking for it, the one group that is the bad guys. If they get in, they're absolutely going to go looking.
And Steve, on that note, what are some of the specific, when we talk about the threats? I think it's can we talk about, and I don't mean just simply exfiltrating data. We know what that means, but what are some of the emerging and evolving kind of threats out there? Like, what comes to mind? And I don't mean to be a cybersecurity webinar cliche right now to bring up AI, but that there is so much new. There are new ways of manipulating data. Algorithms are completely different. There's we're creating these models that are sucking in information, and then we're trusting that the information in and of itself is pure and correct and trusted. So then we can entrust the output of it. But in the context of that ecosystem right there, what are some of the things that that organizations need to be thinking about when securing data kind of in this new generative or just automated environment? What are some of the things that you've seen out there that have created real problems for companies?
So yeah, okay, wow, that's a lot. I told you I'm a sunshine yellow kind of guy. I'm sounding like a cliche myself if I say I'm a data-driven kind of guy. I'm a researcher. I go out. I don't like to tell people a story that isn't supportable by the data. I'd rather have the data speak for itself. So we're talking about threat actors, etc. now, right? So let's talk recent memory. Everybody goes out, they go grab the Verizon data breach report and all this kind of stuff, and they analyze it to death. But we are talking about people, right? So we're talking about people's data. People get affected by this, and it can ruin lives. So let's talk about people's identity. Identity theft is massive, right? Where does identity theft come from? There is a group called the Identity Theft Resource Center. Go look at their data. It's really, really interesting. 3,205. I didn't remember that. I've got it slightly over here, right? So I'm not a memory palace guy. 3,205 data compromises just last year. That sounds like a lot, right? But if we look at how many of those were actual data breaches, so now we're talking about the bad guys. We're talking about somebody going after the data as opposed to data just being lost because we forgot about it or we just left it out there on the internet, right? Out of 3,205, 3,122 were data breaches. That's almost all of them.
Yeah.
But then you pull that down, and that's 300. And this is only, by the way, this is only US data. I know we're a global audience here, and I've got a British accent, but this is just US data. This is only one country, right? Just keep that in mind. So 3,122 data breaches. That was 349 million, which is a number that you can't even really visualize. Almost 350 million individual unique victims. We're talking about people whose lives were really seriously impacted as a result of those 3,000 data breaches. 350 million, right? Precisely 349,221,481 people like you and me, your mom, your dad, your kids, children's identities are being stolen at a massive rate of knots because people are throwing them out there on the internet, and organizations are processing that data and not being very diligent in looking after it. So that's the, if you will, that's the landscape that we're really looking at. So if we now pivot slightly as to look at, well, how does this all occur? And what are the biggest threats right now? The biggest threat right now is the same as the opportunity. We as organizations are leveraging automation, and we have been for many, many years, automation in our technologies and tools to make our lives better, right? I'm a giant science fiction and comic book nerd. This guy up here, who may be recognizable to many of your viewers if you can see this on the screen, is Iron Man. Why is Iron Man so important to me? It's because he's incredibly good looking and rich. And also that he leverages technology to turn what is a normal everyday human being into a superhero. And that's what we're doing as businesses. We are making our people smarter, faster, to accomplish more using technology through automation. I know she stole this from somebody else, but a lady called Melissa Peachy gave me a quote recently, which I really adore, around AI. AI is not new. It's just reached a new level of development. And AI-based tooling and generative AI has so much promise and value to an organization. Physical monetary value and brand reputation, if you can say that your company is built upon or leverages generative AI tooling. But AI is something that is just automation. It's just technology doing some of your work for you, thinking for you in some cases, which is a terrifying thought. But AI and automation is best leveraged in things that take up a lot of time, but don't take up a lot of brain, right? So you don't have to think about it too much, but you spend a lot of your time doing it. Well, you can automate that. You can automate analyzing data in Excel. You can automate sending emails based on data, right? You can automate so many of the things that we do and we take for granted as being grunt work, manual work, fingers on keyboard work every day. Tools and technologies are automated the production of goods. And in technology and industry, any company that truly now seizes on the opportunity of generative AI, they estimate that the S&P 500 in the tech arena of the S&P 500 stock market, it will add 30% to the S&P 500 over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, CFOs would be rubbing their hands with glee, right? If we look at that as the promise of AI, why would you not seize that moment? So now taking it back to the incident pieces, we've been using AI for a long time to try and automate our defenses. Well, the bad guys are now leveraging as much as they can on automation and AI to be able to automate their offensive capability and their attack capability. AI and generative AI tools are being deployed everywhere. If you interact with your bank, it's likely you're talking to a chat bot before you talk to a normal person, just like when you used to call them. You used to talk to a human being, then all of a sudden an IVR, right, a voice recognition system would come in, you'd touch tones on your keyboard, then you'd talk to it. What do you want? What can I do for you today, Bob? I want to speak to a bank manager. Oh, I think I heard you say you want to speak to a bank manager. Let me get you through too. And then, all of those hops, that was automation. Now it's the same. It's the same in chatting. You don't chat to a human being. First, you chat to a chat bot that tries to respond and answer your questions. And that's generative AI. It is automation that is generating content, but it's all fed by data. You train your AIs on data. That's why there is legislation, the EU AI Act. The US has passed its legislation. Countries are rapidly trying to pass legislation to try and keep up because we're running way far behind the development of the technology. So now the bad guys are doing exactly the same. They are leveraging AI to make their phishing emails better because they can now ask ChatGPT and AI to craft emails without the spelling mistakes we would all look for, the grammatical errors, right? To be able to, that's definitely phishing. Now it's getting a lot harder because the bad guys are leveraging those tools. And where we deploy AI in our organizations, that AI can be inherently vulnerable. It's often customer facing and it's often internet facing. Even if it's our own internal customers in our business, it can be customer and client and customer facing. And prompt injections, being able to talk to your AI to get it to do things that you didn't necessarily program it for because it learns from what it's being given. And if you train it on data that is unfortunately biased or not necessarily ethical, then that AI and the engine that powers it will not be trustworthy, will not make ethical decisions. And likewise, if you're training it on sensitive data or you're giving an AI access to sensitive data, these large language models, these natural language chat and reply functionality of AI, you train all of that on sensitive data, then if the bad guys can then craft those prompts, what they call it when you interact with AI, they can mine that data and they can get it exported and dumped out and into a format where they don't even have to attack you anymore because you've effectively given the bad guys access to your crown jewels in the first place, because we are now putting everything out there. So that's the latest attack vector of how data is being targeted by the most innovative tooling on the market.
Yeah, it's we to your point, we don't want to be doom and gloom, but it's important to be mindful.
I do try not to.
I like somebody bought a lottery ticket, now somebody got hit by a bus. I'm gonna take that. If I take nothing else from this call, I will take that as a
we drink our own champagne here as opposed to eating our own dog food. Yeah, totally.
We've talked about and you referenced it again, the notion of stakeholder engagement and I think it's really critical to this point in the context of measuring the effectiveness, right? So we talked about challenges, talk about how to do things. When you're running your data security program, whatever it may look like within your organization, using tools like Experian and others, how do you measure success? I mean, on one hand, you can there's something got to be quantifiable, right? Something kind of that you can measure as a metric, and then there's the soft side of it, which is where I think the stakeholders come in. So I'm just wondering, as folks are looking to either launch or deploy or strengthen their own programs, what are the hallmarks of success, and how do you measure them? And is it all data driven? Not pardon the pun, or are there kind of these soft markers as well that we should look to for to signal success of our efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue that we have to try. We have to try to be data driven as much as possible. This was drilled into me early in my career, as I progressed away from being an individual contributor to a manager to a leader, to an executive. It was pressed upon me that opinions don't matter. When you're looking to get people bought into your mission, right, of what you're trying to achieve with your organization. Define your path, define your mission, and then your opinion really doesn't matter. So Steve believes in protecting data. That's a statement of fact. Steve also believes in being a good guy. I'm a Bill and Ted fan. Be excellent to one another, right? I'm also a little bit punk rock. I'm not a fan of rules. I believe rules are for fools, because you shouldn't have to be told what to do the right thing. Unfortunately, I appear to be somewhat in a minority, realistically out there. People are doing the wrong thing every day, for their own gain or otherwise. And it's important to see that the industry's evolved. But what I was always taught is to approach things and let data tell the story. So, for example, I had to convince an organization, a large organization, that email security was such a massive threat. And no matter how much we trained our people from, security awareness training, don't click on things, when you consider that your general counsel, your chief legal officer, is, according to the statistics of the data of the tooling that we deployed, a serial clicker. I'm not naming any companies that I've ever worked for that this was part of. But when you look at that data and you see the risk, and yet you're training people not to click on things that they don't know from people that they may not get emails from that look a bit suspicious, blah, blah, blah. But when your executive team are doing it, it's really hard sell. So bring in tooling that can mitigate that threat. And then make sure that tooling can produce metrics and data so that you can show the value of it. You have to be focused, especially as a technology leader or a security leader. Cybersecurity as an industry is like a $9 trillion industry or something like that. It's ridiculous, the market cap that cybersecurity tools have, because everybody's chasing the new shiny and they're always bloody expensive. So the key piece around that is, if I'm going to invest, because you can take the boy out of Scotland, but you can't take Scotland out of the boy. If I'm going to invest in technology, if I'm going to convince a board to invest in technology, if I'm going to deploy technology, that technology has to be useful. Mm-hmm. I have to see a hard return, to quote a CIO that I worked for. Soft returns don't matter to me. Oh, we're going to save you some time. That's great. Show me the data. Can't show me the data. Show me what else. What is the hard return I'm going to get on this investment? If I'm putting $100,000 into this tool, then I absolutely want to know where the $100,000 is coming back from. Time savings, cost savings, protection, prevention, mitigation. Where is it? Where are you focusing that? How are you helping the organization grow securely? How are you securing the business? How are you protecting revenue? Make sure the costs of anything that you're doing are directly aligned to the business goals. And if you can do that, then you can show that this cost is critical to growing this area of the business or protecting this area of the business. But we can't sell by fear. And I abhor, people that do that. So as such, show how well we're protecting the business. So when I deployed an email security solution, we trialed it and we cut our entire company email volume in half. We figured out that half of that email was either junk, spam, time wasting, or active threats. So all of a sudden, people were immediately more productive because they weren't wading through useless email. We just got rid of the spam, the sales stuff, the marketing stuff, the junk, the oversubscribed pieces of crap that land in your mailbox. But then going an extra layer of data beyond that, we could see where malicious links were being sent, who was clicking on them and then being blocked. So being able to push that kind of data in front of the executive team to say, we now understand who the most attacked people in our company are, because they're the ones that are receiving the highest volume of these malicious attachments and links. And not only that, by masking, protecting those links and stripping out those attachments, we can still see where our people are trying to access them. So now we've got a training opportunity that we can say, not only are you one of the most attacked people in the company, a VAP, a very attacked person, right? You are also a threat because you click too many links, or you're opening files in too much of a trustworthy manner. Let me educate you on why that can be a problem for the organization, because this is a multi-million-dollar impact problem that we're trying to solve with a $1,000 piece of technology. So that's the value, right? And all of that is driven by data. And working with that particular email security vendor at that time, they had a little graph in their sales chart which showed like this funnel of threats flowing into an organization, like slowly petering out down to like the one good email that you had to read. And I'm like, that graphic is genius. Yeah. Why is that not in my dashboards that I can pull into a report? And they're like, well, it was just marketing fluff. I'm like, but it tells the message really well. So if I put now the statistics on how much spam I've stripped out, how much malware I've stripped out, how many links I've stripped out, and how many ransomware bombs I've triggered and detonated and made safe, my God, that tells a story in one graph. I don't need all your other statistics. Just give me that one chart. They changed their tool and they implemented that graph into their threat chart to be able to tell the story better. So we as leaders can also drive value into organizations by helping steer the product in a manner and a means that makes sense. So it's the same with data security posture management in exactly the same vein. Give people the wins by going out there and saying, well, we scanned HR, all their endpoints, all their file servers, all their applications. We scanned them all. We found 3 million sensitive records we weren't meant to have. We scanned their mailboxes. We found thousands of emails with sensitive data in it that we didn't even know were there. And we can purge all that and totally eliminate the threat. That's a piece of data you can deliver back to your organization from a data security standpoint, and immediately show the value of the tools that you're investing in and the processes that require manpower that you have to build. So that's, again, early in my career, I was always taught, don't let the data tell a story. You don't need to stand up and proselytize and lecture people. You can just leverage data to tell that story, and that's how I've done it as an executive and as a leader and as a founder in any organization I work for. Use the data.
I think that the more experienced one gets, particularly at larger organizations or more professionalized organizations or working with investors and private equity, you do when you're in CISO discussions and these executive discussions on the community side. What's one of the most common things that come up? Learn how to talk to the board, learn how to translate technology to the board.
Yeah, we have to be better storytellers.
It's what you're saying. It is that the context in which a decision maker is going to understand it. Your passion and interest in day to day on security and security speak and tech speak, you have to find a way to translate that. And the one language that everyone understands is numbers, right? And so if you can quantify in a KPI that is easily understood and can be distilled down to a few bullets or a simple graph, I think it applies to this, and it applies, frankly, to any opportunity you have to engage with your leadership and particularly if looking to advocate for something or demonstrate why something you recommended, last quarter or 2 quarters ago was actually a great investment, which is why they should support you next time. It comes down to the effective communication.
Or why we should expand and stop just looking at HR, and now we're going to look at operations. Now we're going to look at sales. Now we're going to look at whatever. We're going to expand this program, this project, into a program, and we're going to take that program and we're going to make it into a company strategy, and then we're going to build that into our culture, and we're going to have a culture of data security. I mean, wouldn't that be great? Something you don't hear very often, right? Nobody has a data security culture. You know, I mean, couldn't we drive that by going away from just a laser focused quick win to a project, to a program, and then from a program to a culture? I mean, if we can build a culture of data protection, then me, you, our friends, families, our children, they would all be safer, right? And then if we look at that as well, in the realm and the lens of data governance is obviously, you know, put out there as more of a compliance related function, even though sometimes security is forced to own it. You get the CISO owning it, but you get all the compliance related pieces having so much stake in the play. I spoke to a room full of compliance professionals, not a security practitioner among them, about 2 weeks ago. And former stand-up comic, I always try and deliver things with a sense of humor, right? I'll use a lot of memes. Willy Wonka is one of my favorite, and Elmo creeps into my presentations all the time. And I pulled a statistic that I'd never used before, because, you know, I used to talk a lot about resiliency and incident response and how the bad guys don't care about your compliance, because you may be compliant as hell, but you still can be breached and the data can still get lost, right? So I found a statistic which I thought was brilliant and may resonate with many of the compliance people in our audience, which is that 84% of organizations that failed a compliance audit in the last year reported having a breach history. And 31% of those, 31% of that 84% had a breach in the last 12 months. Compare that. So all you compliance people out there are now rubbing your hands with glee about this bit, which is 21% compared to 84%. 21% of organizations that pass their compliance audits have a breach history. So you can mitigate the effects of a breach or the impact of a breach by being compliant, because it shows that you're taking the steps to do things seriously, right? Only 3% of those companies suffered a breach in the last 12 months. That's gone from 84, 31, 21, 3%, just by being compliant. Now, everybody talks about scope, right? So you get a compliance scope. Your scope defines your compliance. So it's no good if your scope's over here and your data's over here. So as compliance professionals, we have to make sure that the data is in scope for the compliance activity we're doing. That's your responsibility, Mr. and Mrs. Compliance out there, right? But from a security, a DSPM perspective, data security posture management, what is the posture of the data security of the company, right? Look at it that way. Expand your scope. Look at it where it matters and get started today, but then expand that scope over time until you drive a culture of data security across the company.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's we're coming up on time here. I think that's a really great way to kind of start to wind down. It's a great way to kind of start to wind down the discussion. And I think that's what kind of a final, some final thoughts on this. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the threats, the risk. We've talked about why it's important. We've given some scenarios as to what can happen if you don't effectively prioritize or create a data security program. We talked about these committee and governance programs and how to get it started. If folks who are listening and watching today are trying to figure out where to start and are overwhelmed, when we did our prep call last week, you had a really great recommendation, and I just what would you say to folks who are just like, I don't know where to start, so I'm not really, they're kind of hesitant. Like, what do you say? How do you get them to take that step?
First of all, accuracy matters. You have to go out and find and understand your data. And in doing so, accuracy really matters. But you have to get started. That's the biggest piece. You have to get started by going out and finding that data and understanding why and where that data comes in. And so accuracy really matters when it comes to that. And then it has to be actionable. The information that you get from your data governance program, just like this webinar today, if we're not making these things actionable, things that you can take away and take action on, then it's a problem. And as much as you possibly can, you have to automate that process, because if you tried to do it manually, you will fail. Your organization will have silos and data left out there that you just don't understand. So to be able to understand your data, you need to bring in your stakeholders. To do that, you need to go out, you need to get started, and you need to go find the data. Get the quick wins, show your organization where they've got sensitive data they may not be aware of, and then take the steps to secure that data. and then present your findings and your pieces to your board and to anybody that will listen, to educate people that that data is toxic. It can be of inherent immense value, but data toxicity is what will cost you more than the tools that you're using to try and find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll double click on that. I think the hesitancy to begin and start down this path or journey, whether we're talking about data security, posture management, or any other topic under cyber, is you just sometimes got to get started. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. And there are folks out there like Steve. Reach out your local community, call up, Spirian, whomever it is. There are folks who are there to help. CRA's there to help. I'm there to help. That's why we do CISO Stories. And so, I'd be remiss as a community builder not to talk about the importance of community and your colleagues and peers and your networks to help you, whether you're just getting started or whether you are at a point where you're not sure where to go next. There's all those folks out there to help. So, Steve, this has been a really, really great conversation. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Param. My pleasure completely. It's great to be working with you and working with the team behind SE Magazine again. It's been a long time and a lot of really great content, really good information. It's out there. People like us, we're out there. We want to help. And that's what's important. Community is incredibly important. And tools and technologies like Spirian, where there are people that believe that the biggest thing we can do is protect our people, our families, our communities, our children by protecting the data. But get started. Get started today. If you're not sure how, reach out. Param's here, I'm here, our community's here. Let's talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. So guys, to all you watching at home, thank you so much. We're glad you were joining us on another CISO Stories. Thanks to Steve. Thanks to our sponsor, Spirian. And we will see you on the next edition of CISO Stories. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.